Welcome to Game Time with GameOn, a content series where we pull back the curtain for an intimate look at the people behind GameOn. I'm your host, Matt Bailey, CEO at GameOn. This episode's guest is Jay Moses. Jay greenlit the original Grand Theft Auto and holds a seat on the board of directors at public gaming giant Take-Two Interactive. Jay also serves as chairman and director at GameOn. It's game time. Let's go. Jay, so starting off with how we met, how we got in touch. I think it was a cold email back in 2018 as we were going through Techstars, kind of hustling through that program. You wrote back pretty quickly. We met a few times here in New York, grabbed coffee, spoke about startups, got good feedback from you. You also introduced me to some people you know, set up a few meetings, kind of adding value from the start. And today, obviously, you're the chairman of our board. But back then, what made you reply to a cold email from a founder that you'd never heard of? Is that something you do a lot when you get emails from entrepreneurs?
So I have tremendous empathy for founders, especially for startups, having done it myself. So yes, I always respond. I always do my best to meet in person. Obviously, with COVID, it's been more Zooms. Yeah. But generally speaking, I do have that first meeting. I do have a trick though, which is in the first meeting, I always ask the person to do something.
What did you ask me to do? I can't remember.
I can't remember what I asked you to do, but you did it. And that's kind of my test with people, which is like...
It could be something like, show me your financials, or yes, that's what I think it probably was for us.
It's usually something like that, something that I know isn't going to make that much of a difference, but I just want to see if the person's going to do it, and I want to see if they do it well. And I remember one of the things I was struck by with you is you were on it.
You put me in touch with a few people. Is that just purely to add value, or are you also trying to get an opinion from trusted people in your world?
So that's another trick of mine, right? Which is it has two sides to it, right? Which is one is I like to think I'm a connector. And one of the things I think I do well is connect people, and so it's a benefit to both sides. But the other piece is that I'm always looking for the people I'm connecting you to. Generally speaking, they're people whose opinion I trust and I like, and so it gives me a sort of a second opinion for free.
You're big into sports and games professionally throughout your career, but were you as a kid as well?
So my father was a bookie. My father was the town book.
Wow.
And he had a job with the state working on a road crew, but really what he was the town book. So yes, sports was very much part of my life. I was never allowed to root for the Steelers because when the Steelers won, my dad lost. That was always bad. But I was actually a very good football player. I was a linebacker, an all-state linebacker in Pennsylvania, and that really was my ticket out of the town.
Football sparked your move out of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so I desperately wanted to go to Notre Dame or Pitt or Penn State and play football, and I was recruited by all those. But I got an injury my senior year, and I thought it was a consolation prize at this time, but it was a good thing. I ended up going to Princeton. I was recruited at Princeton, got a scholarship. I was not able to play football in college because I had a shoulder injury, and I started working for ABC Sports in production as a sophomore. They showed up and covered the Dartmouth game my sophomore year, and I kept stats for Chris Schenkel. Thought I'd died and gone to heaven. So I ended up working for ABC Sports on a close to full-time basis. All 3 years I was in college, sophomore, junior, senior year. So when I graduated college, they offered me a job, and I moved to New York City. Full-time job as a PA. And
you've been here ever since? Oh, there's been some places in between.
Yeah, I moved here in '81, so I've been here for 40 years.
Yeah.
I remember when you could not walk through Union Square without getting mugged. So I've seen the city, the evolution of the city. But over the past 40 years, I've lived in Los Angeles, San Francisco twice, Moscow, Bali, lots of different places, but I always come back. My heart's in New York City.
And you were in broadcast for quite some time. You still are, you still do have some, hands in broadcast. What about that did you love? And what keeps you involved in the broadcast world?
Well, I would say that there's nothing like live television. I mean, as Chuck Howard, our producer, used to say it's 801 is 801, whether you're ready for it or not. 801.50 is 801.50. So live sports television teaches you, gives you a real discipline in work. That you have to be prepared. You have to be ready, because when the show opens, you got to be ready, and you have to react to things, and it teaches you how to act under pressure, et cetera, et cetera. And also, I was working with the legends, right? I was working with Cosell and Gifford and Andy Don, Keith Jackson, Frank Broyles. I mean, Jim McKay. It goes on and on. So for a kid who loves sports, grew up in sports, to be sitting in a truck with the legends of sports television, it was pretty extraordinary.
And what drove your transition to games and entrepreneurship?
So when I got out of business school, I went to business school. After ABC Sports, I went to Harvard Business School. And then when I graduated, I got into the digital space. So this is 1992, very, very early. It's when we were figuring out this thing called the internet, and AOL was the web, right? Yep. And I got a job with Times Mirror magazines trying to figure out how to transition things. And I was recruited by BMG to start a games business by Strauss Zelnick, who you know. And I started that as the president of BMG Games. And it was an independent game publisher business. And we put 13 games in development. One of those was GTA, so I green-lighted Grand Theft Auto. And another one was Moto, which ended up being a huge game for EA. And another game was Spec Ops, which was another huge game. So we actually had one mega hit, but 3 hits in our portfolio. BMG didn't like the content because it was a private German company. They didn't like the raciness of a GTA. And so they wanted out of the business, and it was sold to this little startup. Not startup, but it was sold to a small company at the time, had a public shell called Take-Two. That's how Take-Two ended up getting all the titles.
And then after that is when you got into entrepreneurship and founded?
So after the BMG experience, well, I had a great boss in Strauss and his boss was amazing, and Michael Dornemann. But the experience of building something and then having it shut down was very frustrating for me. And I decided that I wasn't going to go the corporate route anymore. So at that point, when I was in Russia, I was helping to develop this concept called UGO, which was Unified Gamers Online, which was essentially a large blog network, which we founded right after I got back from Moscow in 1997.
And during that period of foundership, you went through not one, but 2 financial crashes, right?
So, yes. Well, the first one was really dramatic. We had raised about $70 million. We didn't really have a business. It was the go-go days of New York City, and 2000 hit. And we know what happened during that, the bubble, if you will, and then 2001 after that. So it was a very challenging time. We had to recap the company. We were able to keep it alive, et cetera, et cetera. I was lucky. I ended up selling the business to Hearst just before the second crash. After the crash, there were only 5 or 6 real tech businesses in New York City that survived. We would get together at a place called Eno, which is down in the Village. They used to have this great egg truffle toast. We would get together like once a month, and there were like 5 of us. It was Jason Kelkanis, it was David Morgan, it was Kevin Ryan from DoubleClick, David Rosenblatt. It was just this group of folks. They were all guys. Didn't have to be guys, but they were in fact guys. And we'd get together and just kind of sit around and cry together. Just sort of. It's sort of like playing musical chairs where you have like 20 people and you have 2 chairs or 3 chairs and the music stops and everybody tries to grab one of those chairs. That's what it's like when you're in a market that crashes. Yeah. And I would say that people today, but today, there's amnesia. There's always amnesia in business. People forget the markets go up, that physics does apply, markets go down. Yeah. So I have lived through 2 complete crashes.
Do you think what we just saw with COVID is somewhat comparable to that in any way?
No, because the money disappeared in 2000. That was the big issue.
There was fear that it would happen again, today, but it didn't quite. Yeah.
In fact, just the opposite. I would say that the money supply has just gone up, and values have gone up dramatically. And
then you ended up back with Strauss at Take-Two Interactive, this time as a director. One of the biggest gaming public companies in the world. It must be exhilarating just to be part of the decision making of what's driving that business day to day. What is one of the most exciting things about being on a board of such a high profile public company? What makes you want to turn up for that role each day?
So I would say, I love the game business. I've been in it for 25 years. I really love the game business. So being part of the game business is great. Two is, Take-Two is an extraordinarily well-run business. Strauss and Carl and the team are very talented, and they run a very tight ship. And thirdly, it's just, if you're going to do it, my opinion is it's better to do it with a company like this than an insurance company. Nothing against the insurance business, but this is a lot more fun. They have better swag, definitely. Good swag.
And you reference Strauss quite a lot, and I've met him through the startup world as well, and often you're referencing him in ways that I can improve, or things that I should take notice of. I know the answers to this, but what's the one thing that Strauss is just excels at, and something that any startup founder or entrepreneur should take notice of?
I would say it's clarity. He has tremendous clarity on what he wants, and he has tremendous clarity in the way he communicates that. And when you're running a $20 billion business and you have offices all over the world and businesses all over the world, and you're in the creative business, it's good to have that clarity. And he's very good about being very clear on what he wants and how to get there, and he communicates that very clearly. So people around him understand what the rules are and what the mission is.
Now, to your role at GameOn, you've been chairman for almost a year now, coming up on a year. You followed us as a private startup for another year, and me as a founder. When I came to you and said, this is what we're doing, we're going public in Canada as a small market cap business, we're going to raise this money, grow the team, and this is the path we're taking. Right. What got you over the line to get on board of the GameOn ship and excited about this more non-traditional path for an early stage startup?
Well, first, I really like working with you. I think you are a person you have great integrity. You do exactly what you say you're going to do. And if you have an issue with something, you'll be very clear in talking about that. So those are great qualities. Secondly, the company's mission is a mission I believe in, right? I've spent a lot of my life in traditional media, and traditional media is in trouble. There's no two ways about it, right? It's in trouble. All you have to do is look at the ratings, you look at the numbers. My 14-year-old son is playing, Fortnite when I'm watching.
He doesn't know how to turn on the traditional
He doesn't know how to turn on traditional TV, and I can't get him to watch a football game with me, although he knows what's going on in the games. So traditional media is in big trouble. Engagement is the answer, right? Because that's what the consumer wants. The viewers want engagement below a certain age, which is a significant part of the traditional media hasn't figured out how to engage the fan or the audience beyond a linear sort of feed, if you will. That's what GameOn is doing, right? GameOn is giving these companies the opportunity to offer engagement to their viewers, to their consumers. And I'm a really big believer in it. Now, there are all kinds of, that sandbox is big, right? There's crypto in it, there's NFTs in it, there's engagement, there's fantasy, there's all this stuff. GameOn is in a position where it can engage or participate in all those different categories within the space. So I absolutely like it. From a traditional, non-traditional, for me, it's funding, right? There are different ways to fund a company. No way is incorrect, no way is correct. There are just different ways to do it. And I had never been part of this process in the Canadian exchange. And part of me is just I'm a curious person. I wanted to see how that worked. But the other piece is it seemed like a very efficient way of funding a business outside of the kind of the norms, if you will, right? And I was totally into that. I think it's good to disrupt. And this is a bit of a disruption.
With that capital, we've been able to grow and put those resources to use that we've never been able to do before.
Absolutely. So. And now you have a public market, and we have a liquid currency, which is a completely different thing. Again, not necessarily better, not necessarily worse, but a very different thing than if we had gone the traditional route of raising money from VCs.
For sure.
And there are lots of issues with that model.
Yeah. And within that sandbox that you mentioned, of opportunity, there's so many different things in there. Which is the most exciting one for you? Like, if we're looking towards the future of the next few years, what's the most exciting and engagement opportunity for content that you're most excited about for GameOn?
Well, I'm very excited about the concept that we call them NFTs. I hate the word NFTs, right? I just think it's a terrible name. But this concept of a virtual good, it's a fantastic part of the future. We know, coming from the game business, virtual goods have been a part of the game business for the past 15 years. So there's nothing new here to the audience. My son considers a virtual good to be every bit as valuable, if not more valuable than a physical good. So you don't have to convince a 14-year-old or a 16-year-old or a 25-year-old person that a virtual good has the inherent value, right? So taking those virtual good concept out of the game business and applying it to other categories, to me, is just, it's going to work. So we're going to see a lot of change in this category. You're going to see the adoption rates are going to be very high. You're going to see older generations, if you will, older folks, people in older demographics adopting virtual goods. I'm very bullish on it. So that's one category. Very, very excited about wagering. You know that. Guess that my father's rolling around up there laughing. But sports wagering, fantastic future. Lots of growth. It's inevitable. There's going to be lots of growth. Fantasy, all these types of categories that support that, right? Wagering, sports wagering, wagering of any sort, wagering of chance, right? These are all really, really big categories, and GameOn can play in all of them.
Well, Jay, thank you. For not only for looking after our shareholders and everything you do for the company, but for me personally as a founder, you've done a lot as well. So we appreciate it. And thank you for sharing your story to everyone today. Thank you for bringing me along with you. I appreciate it. I'm a lucky guy. Thanks for tuning in to Game Time with GameOn. Next up, Sabrina Carrozza. See you then.